Everybody, welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting on May 15th. We'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to start out by asking the interpreter to explain interpretation services. Please go ahead.
Good morning. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on Mute Original Audio to not hear the original Spanish logo in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días, aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from 4 cultural groups, the Kumaya Degueño, the Sueño, the Capueño, and the Coilla. This land has nourished, healed, and protected and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now, please join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Francesca, can you confirm we have a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
Great. With that, we'll start heading into the agenda. A couple of things I wanted to note. We've received information about this, but one, item 3.5 on the consent calendar has been pulled. We will not be hearing that today. Any motion with respect to 3.5, consent won't include 3.5. Oceanside has withdrawn their request. Also, many of us know today was supposed to be the first hearing for the FAIR study from the agencies. I believe Robin will have more to say about that later as to why we aren't hearing that today, but just so people know, we won't be hearing that. With that, we'll go ahead and move into the agenda. I've asked the clerk to keep the time for public speakers to 2 minutes, with the exception of consent, which we will give 1 minute on consent. Francesca, can you call the first public speaker on the non-agenda items?
Thank you, Chair. If you're a member of the public who'd like to speak and you're online, please do raise your hand now. We have 3 public comments in person. We'll start with Purita Javier and then Cesar Javier. Yes, sir.
Good morning. We are hurt, and I will appear from next door. Hazardon, home, business, ceramics manufacturing, and kiln located, constructed, and operated since 1984. My exposure to ceramics kiln began in 1997, and my husband Cesar in 2012. We formally reported this environmental hazards beginning June of 2021 with the police, fire, code enforcement, and the county hazardous material office, but they cannot investigate because they have permit. Treasures of Haze declared that they do not have regularly standard or we did research and found out that facilities go through conservation standard before the last permit. Fire permit, the owner did not go through such procedure. Why? APCD became independent.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Next will be Cesar Javier, followed by allegedly Audra, and then we have 2 comments online.
Sircito, gentlemen, ladies, brothers and sisters. Our niece protected us. She laid her supreme life rendition of patriotism and love of this country and people, and of God, of course. This concern of ours, after the police, we referred it to our leadership, Councilor Rivera, Sean Rivera, and we followed it up, only to find out that he is a governing board member of the APCD, with the rule exempt for ceramics in locating, constructing, and operation. He wrote us a letter. Mr. Javier, if you have any concern, don't worry. Something like that, I will reach APCD, only to discover that he is always absent. He doesn't know anything about environmental hazards, if I may say that. And I have in my heart and soul the evidences, deception. And up to now, he has not thought of a solution to stop this environmental hazard. This is the unseen enemy in general terms, victimizing Sandiegans particularly. And we notice that in the city governance of the 47 departments, no focus, no office to look into health and human services. So what happened?
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Jillian Quint. Thank you, Mr. Javier. Your time has expired.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm wondering, it's interesting. I keep seeing cars that are flipped over on their tops, and they're like a solo car. I'm wondering if you guys are teaching people how to do that, because it's very interesting to see out in the unincorporated area. But it's interesting as well to see how expensive driving is going to be coming up when we get our, road usage charge or whatever coming down from the state. So we're going to have to pay a pretty penny if we just want to travel in San Diego. And then the toll roads that you guys want to bring forward, right, and charge us for that. And then I'm sure once that road usage charge comes down from the state, you guys bring it back here. It was already being talked about a few years ago. You guys, wanted to pretend like you're going to do something to to protect the people here. But it seems like you're just really working hard to get people out of their cars, right? I mean, that's what we've talked about for years. I mean, because we can't have them driving. But if we're going to be having them use public transit, you guys probably want to get on that lickety split because it's not very productive. You cannot, unless I guess the goal could be that you don't really want people to travel throughout San Diego. So that's the point of it not really being something where if you're like in the unincorporated area, like you can just keep the people there. When, just even getting a permit to leave our 15-minute zone is going to be coming as well. And just the fact that you guys are engaged with BlackRock and Vanguard, how do you guys feel about that? Just giving all our data to them. Isn't that interesting? Because like at whatever point they want, they're just like, let's bring the government to its knees. Let's let them put all their assets and everything in these programs and these software things that we buy or provide. And then they'll think that the data breaches are going to come from outside of it. But no, it'll come from inside because, why go from outside if you're getting the data just given to you? So, yeah, I'm just wondering, are you guys excited about that? Because you're doing a really good job. Cool. People are going to suffer.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Jillian Quint, followed by Blair Beekman.
Good morning, SANDAG committee members. I just wanted to provide an update from a recent mobility audit by the San Diego River Park Foundation and Circulate Planning and Policy. The audit was included in your packet today as well. It highlighted a significant fracture point where the San Diego River Trail abruptly ends at the city's Sefton Field. This is also the site of the planned West Valley River crossing. This break in the trail forces users onto high-risk frontage roads, including a merge where vehicles exiting the freeway make a right turn through where the bikes and pedestrians travel. Our audit showed that between a 4-year period, 2020 to 2024, 23 pedestrians and 31 bicyclists were injured, and 6 pedestrians were killed within a quarter mile of this route, emphasizing the need for safer and more connected infrastructure. The proposed West Valley River crossing is a high priority infrastructure project recognized across multiple long-range planning frameworks and also discussed recently by this committee. So also wanted to just give you an update from last week's city budget hearings. Council President LaCava inquired about funding the crossing using outside sources from the general fund, so specifically restricted developer impact fees, which this project would qualify for, and utilizing these funds would allow the city to prioritize this infrastructure as we were recommended through the SANDAG committee to pursue. So just wanted to suggest that the committee collaborate with city leadership to ensure that these restricted funds are activated to begin to move forward on this project during this current budget season. And again, the funding that would be put into the pot by the city would not compete with general funds. Thanks so much for any follow through and would appreciate any discussion on this item.
Thank you. Our final speaker on this item will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. I just attended a Bay UWASI meeting in the Bay Area. They have public meetings quarterly. They're doing okay. They're trying to work through some serious changes they're going through, and they're trying their best. So it was an okay meeting, looking towards a good future. I wanted to comment on the train back down to San Diego right now. And okay, good. The PA speaker stopped. The items I wanted to comment on, thank you that the fair hearing has been put off for a little longer. It's my sincere hope that I know you can get money sooner, more money sooner if you start the fare increases sooner. But I just wanted to remind if it's any possible way that you can put off large fare increases for monthly passes for disabled people and seniors. I think that needs a little bit more reflection and a review and comment. I don't think you'll be ready by this September. I think it'll take a little longer. I hope you can work on it, and it can be okay to wait a little longer if possible. To just say those words, I hope, can be of help for your process. The city of Oakland is again, besides leaving Flock in the next 2 years, they're going to be leaving possibly a law enforcement technology vendor that for a next 1 year period. They're doing it slow, methodical, inviting the community to a process of changing the current status quo. I hope San Diego County really takes heart of that and wants to follow such good things. And I have more to say. Should look towards peace, not war. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Robin, do we have an agency update?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robin Wapner. I'm your Senior Director for Administration and Public Affairs here at SANDAG, filling in for Mario, who is traveling this week to participate in the California Transportation Commission meeting up north in San Jose. So a few updates for you today. One, the board passed the FY27 program budget for SANDAG at its last meeting on Friday. So I'm sure you all know that is a huge feat every year, putting together the budget. So we just want to recognize all of the work of staff and the board in participating in the development of that important document. And more importantly, actually implementing and delivering all the projects and programs that will be included within it for the next year. On that note, the governor also released his May revise yesterday for the state budget. That's when he releases his updated projections for the upcoming year for the state budget. And so that's something that we're obviously closely watching. Not expecting any increases in transportation funding at the state level. In fact, we do have some concerns with where cap and trade, or now known as cap and invest funding, is going in the coming years. It looks like maybe some of the discretionary grant programs that we've relied heavily on in the past may not be receiving the same level of funding as they have. And so that's something that we are coordinating with the California Transit Association with and others to try to ensure that that funding continues to be provided so that our region can continue to access those dollars. On the theme of funding, I'll also be traveling to Washington, D.C. next week to participate in a Mobility 21 Coalition trip to engage in conversations around the upcoming Surface Transportation Authorization Bill. This is the federal version of how we get our transportation funding. Sort of the same news, not expecting any increases. It may not happen until next year, but it's really important that we're at least at the table to help inform what those conversations are and make sure that our region is positioned as well as it can be to try to access some of those funds for the projects that we want to get delivered here. So stay tuned on that. Funding is not going to be an easy conversation for the next year or a few years to come. Related to that, Chair Zito mentioned the fair ordinance item that was scheduled to come to you today. We have pushed that to June and July for the Transportation Committee to consider. That's because we wanted to take some more time to do additional public outreach to make sure that the community really does have the opportunity to participate in this very important conversation, that this committee is able to receive the feedback from the public and consider that as you're making your decisions. So we have scheduled 2 new public outreach events on June 9th. One will be here at SANDAG and the other will be in San Marcos. Details on both of those events will be coming out shortly. We want to encourage everyone to please participate in that. We want to hear from you all so that you have that information as you're considering that item next month. In other news, we have officially signed our agreement with the transportation corridor agencies regarding the transition of our back office system for the 125 and the 15. And so we've started our kickoff meetings, are starting to work very closely with them and are still working towards a transition in about the next year or so. So we'll be sure to keep you and the board updated on how that is progressing, a very important project for the agency. We also have officially kicked off the next phase of the downtown stopover project. For those of you who have been around for a while, that's something we've been talking about for a long time. So we are excited that we are moving forward on that. That's a very important priority for MTS. So we're working closely with them to identify any potential alternatives that can be quickly implemented to help some of the buses that are currently parking on the streets around those properties. Earlier this week, Caltrans and SANDAG hosted a scoping meeting for the I-578 Interchange Improvements Project, another really important milestone for a major project in the region. This kicks off the CEQA environmental process. And so this is a time when the public can provide their comments on the proposed project and the proposed environmental the potential environmental impacts. So we had a great turnout. It was in Oceanside. Mayor Sanchez was able to join us as well as some other electeds. It was really great to see so many people interested in the project. Again, we want to hear from everyone. This has been a project a long time in the making. and will be a long time in the doing. We're currently funded for the environmental phase with Transnet funding. But as I was talking about all those funding measures at the state and federal level, that's where we're going to need to find those construction dollars in order to be able to move the project forward after environmental. So something that we're working very closely with our legislative delegations on. This weekend, there will be an absolute work window on the Lausanne corridor as we continue work on the Bataquitos double track project, another Transnet project that is moving forward, as well as Del Mar Bless 5. So 2 important projects that we're having to close down the rail line just for this weekend to move those forward. I also wanted to flag our bikeway projects. We call them bikeway projects. They're really like complete streets infrastructure improvement projects. And we have 6 of those in construction right now. That is a huge number of projects for us. It's actually the most bike projects we've had in play at the same time in the history of the bike program. And I flag that because these can often be the most disruptive, the most controversial sometimes projects because they are so localized. We are impacting people's lives when we go on the local streets to build these really important projects. So we just want to say thank you to everyone for your patience. These projects are notorious, difficult to sort of project how much they're going to cost. We're trying to get better at that. We're putting new internal controls and guardrails on to think about project schedules, planning for the unexpected, because something's always popping up on that. So if you're hearing about bike projects a lot, that's because there is a lot going on, and that's unfortunately what it takes to deliver these really important projects on our local streets and roads. Speaking of the bike program, next week is Bike Anywhere Day on Thursday. I know several of you are slated to join us at one of our more than 100 pit stops across the region, so thank you for that. Those pit stops will be open from 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. next Thursday. Please plan to join us if you're not already and help us get the word out for that. And then lastly, just flagging that our offices here and our customer office center will be closed on Monday, May 25th in honor of Memorial Day. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions there may be.
Thanks. So, Sean, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the update, Robin. I just wanted to say thank you for acknowledging the impacts these projects have in the community. And I do really think these projects are an example of like why it matters, why the way we talk about things matters. As you said, it's not like, so University Avenue as an example, huge project. It's not a bike project. It's a massive upgrade for pedestrian, vehicle, and bicycle safety. Multiple enhancements. And so I think we kind of could keep running into this brick wall, but it's self-inflicted because we put this out to the world, that all this disruption, all this cost is going to come. And if you don't sit here in these meetings, you have no reason to understand that it's not just a bike project. And so the costs seem outrageous. The time seems outrageous. The inconvenience, if you're not someone who sees yourself riding on the bike, seems like it will have no benefit to you. And so, and I say this as someone who benefits from those lanes as a person who rides as often as I can to work. So I really would like us to step back and think about the way that we describe these projects in a way that's more, that better reflects what they actually are going to bring to the community, so that folks know that these are projects that really aim to improve quality of life for people from young to old, cyclists, drivers, pedestrians, et cetera. And to me, that's not just words on paper. It's like actually a way of helping build trust in community and helping them understand that their tax dollars are going to use in a way that benefits a very, very broad set of community members. So thank you for the acknowledgement. And I hope we can do better in how we describe these projects so that, again, folks who aren't part of the SANDAG world, part of the relatively small circle of folks who dig into the documents to see what's actually coming, so that when they see the name of the project, they immediately understand what benefits they will get from it. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Appreciate it. Anybody else have any non-agenda comments? I did want to make one other, Robin mentioned this. You all should have received an email yesterday about the public meetings that are occurring on the 9th, where we need to have a monitor there, for lack of a better term. So if anybody is interested in filling that role at one of those 2 meetings, let me know, or I should say let Francesca know by next week. And then I will go ahead and make any appointments as appropriate for filling that role. Seeing nobody else up for non-agenda public comments, we will move on to the consent calendar. Again, I will remind everyone that item 3.5 has been pulled. So we're looking at items 3.1 to 3.4. And Francesca, can you call the speakers and who are interested in speaking on 3.1 to 3.4?
Thank you, Chair. If you're online and would like to speak on consent, please raise your hand now. We have 2 in person, Cesar Javier and then allegedly Audra.
Three point one. Yes, we are satisfied with the processes, policy crafting, implementing. Our effort as community, sustainability, resiliency, advocacy. Thank you. 3.2. Yes, there were robust discussion on amendments. You know, in fighting a war, you got to change your approach, if only to speed up winning against environmental hazard. 3.3. Yes, we were a witness. We are a witnesses with my wife to the process. We need improvement, improvement, improvement. And we have felt the continuity of this from ITOC's point of view, where the city of Lemon Grove gave.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be allegedly Audra, followed by Blair Beekman online.
Need to quit telling people bike anywhere day. If you can't bike anywhere, it should be bike most anywhere. And cost and time seems outrageous, Sean. No, it is. It's extremely outrageous what you spend the money for bike lanes on, especially when they go to nowhere. And with your TDA compliance audits, it's interesting that you need an audit to see if a project is complete. Why does that take that to happen? It's very interesting because you should do audits to make sure that you're not spending millions of dollars per mile on bike lanes that go to a freeway or to a nursery that nobody in the public can to get to. You can't tell me that you guys think that you're making sound mind decisions when that's taking place. And then we talk about cost and time being outrageous. That's extremely egregious and negligent. And you guys sit here and it's like you do audits to make sure that you're in compliance with what you're supposed to be spending the money on. So you do spend the money the way that you're supposed to, but it's on bullshit and lanes that go nowhere.
Thank you. Our final speaker on consent will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. To be clear, in the next 1 to 2 years, the city of Oakland is going to be sitting down with community and planning different ALPR vendors and different law enforcement data collection vendors for the future. And the fact that it's a community process, and if Oakland can keep those promises, I think it gives an incredibly good model of compromise how we move forward in San Diego County. Good luck in reviewing their programs. I wanted to quickly comment that you have Transnet issues you're working with, and from the meeting minutes of last time, an extension ordinance funding eligibility. It was mentioned at the fare rate increases for SDMTS that Transnet can be counted on as a funding source and can possibly be used if we need to put off major decisions in the next few months, and and have final decisions in 6 months.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Any committee member comments? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve consent.
And make a motion to approve the consent
Moved by
agenda.
Fleming. Did I see it?
I'll second.
A second by Mendoza. Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is the active transportation program cycle call for projects. And Jenny, I thought it was Jenny was going to kick this off, or is it Goldie that's going to kick this off? Oh, there she is.
Good morning, Transportation Committee members. My name is Jenny Russo. I'm the Grants Program Manager here at SANDAG. Many of you, if you've been on this committee for a while, you may remember me. I've run all of our competitive grant programs. I'm very familiar with the Active Transportation Program, or ATP, that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to let Goldie lead the presentation, but if you have questions about it, some really detailed questions or anything about the CTC, I'll be here to help her out. So I will let Goldie lead the presentation.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Chair Zito and members of the Transportation Committee. Again, my name is Goldie Herban, and I'm a Senior Grants Program Manager, Program Analyst on the Grants team. And many of you have seen me before. I've presented this item to you all on March 27th, and I presented the draft regional ATP Cycle 8 call for projects and scoring rubric. And the objective of that March meeting was to seek guidance and recommendations from you all on the draft to consider and ensure alignment with regional priorities in the next competitive cycle. But for those of you that weren't able to be at that March 27th meeting, I'm just going to quickly recap what the Active Transportation Program is, or ATP. So ATP is a discretionary grant program. It's led by the California Transportation Committee, or Commission, or CTC, and they release a call for projects every 2 years. The ATP funds projects that encourage active modes of transportation, enhances public health, increases safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And many different entities are eligible to receive ATP grant funding. They include cities, Caltrans, tribal governments, transit agencies, schools and school districts, and regional planning agencies like SANDAG. So the CTC adopted the 2027 Cycle 8 ATP guidelines and a funding estimate in March of 2026. That approval allowed for $619 million to be released for this program as a whole. As shown on this slide is a donut chart that breaks out the 3 competitive cycles that are run through this ATP grant program. The funding made available specifically to our region is distributed in 2 competitive programs. The first one is the statewide competition, and its allocation is shown in blue here. That's $310 million that's made available. And then also available to our region is the regional competition, which is indicated in the green. So the statewide competition, which again offers $310 million, is open right now, and applications are due on June 22nd. Any non-successful state application that comes from our region will be automatically considered for the regional competition, which is what we're talking about today. So the San Diego, or SANDAG region, was allocated approximately $22.5 million from that regional pot in green that you see. That's 4%. That allocation is calculated and based on regional population. And that is the amount that we're going to release in the regional ATP Cycle 8 call for projects. A couple of things to note about this programmatic funding. One, at least a minimum of 25% of all program funding must benefit a disadvantaged community, or a DAC, and only 2% of program funds can go to plan projects. A quick refresher, there are 3 project category types. One is plans, infrastructure, and the third one is non-infrastructure projects, or a combination of those 3 types of projects. So with that 2% cap placed on our regional pot, only about $450,000 from the regional competition may go to plan projects. So the CTC allows us to use differing metrics from the statewide CTC guidelines for our regionals competition, which means that we can tailor the call for projects in San Diego for our specific needs. So we can mold the scoring criteria, we can adjust scoring weights at our discretion, we can place minimum project sizes and place certain weights on match requirements. While we can set regional priorities, we must still adhere to the core CTC guidelines. And more importantly, the regional call for projects must be approved by the CTC. On this slide is a progression of the steps that we have taken to develop the regional ATP Cycle 8 call for projects. So first, SANDAG staff looks at the major updates from the Cycle 8 statewide CTC guidelines and any major updates that have occurred year over year for the last cycle. And then we sync up those updates to our local call for projects if needed. And then SANDAG staff performs Cycle 8 Regional 8 ATP outreach to solicit feedback from stakeholders and policy advisory committees on the draft call for projects. So we didn't do this in a vacuum. We did hold 2 stakeholder workshops, one on March 26th and one on April 14th, and we invited all member agencies' technical staff that work on active transportation projects. And we also invited past applicants from regional ATP cycles from the past 2 cycles. We asked for their feedback in these virtual workshops, but we also allowed them to present comments to us via email. And also, as I mentioned earlier, on March 27th, we brought this draft call for projects and the scoring rubric to the Transportation Committee, where we asked for everyone's recommendations as well. So that since that meeting, we considered all the comments and we adapted the draft call for projects and the scoring rubric in response to those comments. And now that final call for projects and that final scoring rubric is before you today as attachments 2 and attachments 3 for your consideration and approval to the board. So in the next several slides, I'm going to cover what grant staff heard collectively from stakeholders and transportation committee members, and then I'll walk through the specific changes that we made to address your comments. So this slide is a bulleted list of the summary of feedback that we received. If you want to see a detailed narrative about each of these bullets, please reference attachment 1 of this item. So there was strong support from the Transportation Committee to keep geographic distribution, and many stakeholders agreed also. This ensures that ATP investments are felt throughout the region and not just concentrated in clusters in the region. This methodology of geographic distribution was presented and included in the draft call for projects, so we've maintained geographic distribution in the call. And so we've continued to do that as a result of this feedback. So a major priority to the Transportation Committee and stakeholders was enhancing connectivity, and there was agreement on incentivizing projects that do 2 things: that link people to jobs and activity centers, and to strengthen our existing transit network by providing greater access. To ensure the most competitive high-impact work is funded, there was also a call to increase the minimum points threshold. Doing so will protect the integrity of the grant's competition, and it will do that by separating and removing high-risk or low-quality proposals that come in. The Transportation Committee recommended increasing points for matching funds, and this encourages local agencies to bring more skin in the game and allow regional dollars to stretch further. And finally, the feedback was clear and pretty simple to streamline the evaluation criteria. So based on this, SANDAG staff have proposed a process that is rigorous but not as overly burdensome for applicants like past rounds of funding. And so now this slide presents the key changes that were made to the scoring criteria, which is attachment 3, to address the feedback that we received. So the first goal was to simplify the process. What we did was we consolidated any duplicative criteria and eliminated criteria to ensure that we aren't counting the same benefit or asking for the same information from the applicant twice. And in a couple of slides, I'll go over what exactly we consolidated and eliminated so you could see the outcome of those changes. There was a shift to emphasize transit connectivity. And projects that connect to existing transit will now receive more points for those projects that connect to planned transit. And in doing this, we will reward projects that provide immediate utility to the current network. The updated demand analysis now focuses more on contextual demand, and it rewards high-volume urban connections while also prioritizing suburban and rural areas that provide essential links to jobs and activity centers. This ensures a level playing field for all member agencies, regardless of their zip code. Oh, sorry. To make scoring more manageable, the rubric has been significantly pared down, and as a result, the maximum points possible went from 200 to 150 points. And resoundingly, TC and stakeholders supported raising the minimum total scores for projects to be considered for funding. So previously in cycle 7, projects only needed to score 30% of points, 60 out of 200 to be considered for funding. That bar has been raised to 50%, and now projects must score 75 points out of a possible 150 to be considered for funding. This ensures that every project we fund meets a high standard of regional significance and technical quality. And finally, we've updated our tiebreaker rules to align with the updated scoring rubric and scoring criteria. And this ensures that there's a clear and fair path to selection if 2 projects are neck and neck or have the same exact score. Okay, so the next 3 slides illustrates a summary of the final evaluation criteria for each project type that's eligible for ATP funding. So infrastructure is up first. This project type makes up the vast majority of submissions, and therefore this criteria on the slide will be used the most and will be most critical for you all to understand, as they will determine a bulk of the funding allocation. So as you look at the criteria breakdown in the table, any criteria that's in purple bold is an exact criteria reflective of the CTC guidelines that we mirror in our final call for projects. Critically, criteria 1, 2, and 3 have been specifically tailored to our region's unique goals and needs, ensuring that we prioritize projects that fit the local context. So to dive a little deeper, I'll now share the outcome of the consolidation and eliminations that kind of streamlines this scoring effort. So first, we merged all location and connection related criteria and subcriteria from cycle 7 under the umbrella category of connectivity. To give you like a specific example, demand analysis used to be its own criteria. So demand analysis asks for a specific project location that's location related and is associated with connectivity. We threw it under the umbrella of connectivity. Another example is previously applicants had to fill out identical or repetitive prompts related to bicycle improvements and pedestrian improvements, but it was the same exact question and it made no sense to answer it twice. So we consolidated these questions, made them more holistic, and asked about multiple modes of transportation so that they wouldn't have to repeat the information throughout their application. We also moved the supportive policies and programs standalone criteria because we realized that it's very connected to project ready and completion of major milestones. That's because supportive policies and programs are vital in maximizing the success of a capital project and enables better planning, risk management, and execution. So that fit well under the category of project readiness and completion. There was also miscellaneous safety questions throughout the criteria, and we grouped those all in under criterion 2, safety and quality of the project. We eliminated the cost effectiveness criteria from the last cycle. There was stakeholder concerns over its subjectivity, and it was determined that it was not successfully evaluating cost effectiveness in an objective way, so that was removed. We are also able to analyze a project's quality using other sub-criteria under the main criterion, safety and quality of projects as well. And the last consolidation I want to mention was public health was its own standalone criteria as well, but we grouped that under benefits to disadvantaged communities, and that's because the CTC guidelines shows that what public health measures, which is high health risk factors, is directly tied or is an indication of a disadvantaged community. So those categorized or paired well together, and we grouped those together for streamlining. So those were the consolidation and streamlining outcomes for the infrastructure scoring criteria. And now I just want to shift topics to talk about the ways in which we weight these criterion for scoring. So based on direct feedback from our stakeholder groups and the Transportation Committee in March, we have adjusted the weighting from the last cycle to better reflect regional priorities expressed. So connectivity, criterion 1 connectivity, the weighting was increased to 23% because we're placing a higher value on how well the projects link to existing networks and close gaps. Project readiness weighting increased to 27%. This is a major change as we are heavily prioritizing prioritizing projects that have major milestones completed and ensure timely delivery and reduce the delivery risk. We increase the benefit to disadvantaged communities to focus on projects that provide meaningful improvements in our disadvantaged communities. And we increase matching funds to 6%. And while this is still a smaller portion of the overall total project amount, the weight for leveraging additional funding has been increased to encourage comprehensive project financing from potential applicants. So in short, we've significantly streamlined the process for this cycle to reduce the administrative burden on our applicants. We've consolidated the infrastructure scoring back from in the last cycle, we had 10 criteria. Now that's dwindled down to 6. And the sub-criteria questions have been reduced from 20 questions down to 15 questions. This refinement allows us to focus on what matters the most, and it's to fund and or prioritize ready-to-go projects that have heavy positive impacts on our disadvantaged communities and that allow for high connectivity. Any prospective applicants should ensure that their project narratives lean heavy into these specifically weighted criteria if they are seeking infrastructure funding. So this slide covers the criteria of non-infrastructure projects. So these are primarily not soft investments. So think education, public outreach campaigns, or encouragement programs. So historically, we've seen a low volume of projects that submit for this funding. And that's because these types of initiatives are most impactful or most competitive, if you will, when paired with an infrastructure project. And if you pair with an infrastructure project, then that project gets funded or gets evaluated with the scoring that I just talked about, the infrastructure evaluation criteria. However, if you are pursuing a purely non-infrastructure project, this is the scoring rubric that you would follow to adapt your application. So just like the previous slide, the purple text indicates evaluation criteria directly from the CTC guidelines. And while we stayed aligned with the state, our regional scoring puts a much heavier weight on this on the scale for 3 specific areas, criterions 1, 2, and 3. The first one is comprehensiveness and benefits to active transportation users. So here we are looking for well-defined scalable projects that complement capital improvements or larger transit efforts. And high-scoring projects must demonstrate clear and measurable benefits for active transportation users. For criterion 2, methodology, projects need to provide rigorous step-by-step plans for how the program will be executed and how the success of the plan or program will be tracked. And then criterion 3, community needs and support. To score well here, the project must be a direct response to a demonstrated community need, and the project must be backed by documented support from the people it's intended to serve. Even in this category, SANDAG staff have applied the same streamlining logic as we did in the infrastructure scoring table. So we've narrowed the focus from 10 criteria down to 6 for this cycle. And the outcome from consolidations and eliminations in this project category were we removed the sub-criteria related to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And that's because this sub-criteria, all ATP projects innately will contribute to reducing VMT, therefore reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we felt that this was an unnecessary sub-criteria and became onerous for applicants to prove, if you will. And so we eliminated that one. We also consolidated any criteria that was related to project completeness or comprehensiveness or providing benefits to an active transportation user or an active transportation's experience using ATP infrastructure. And then under community needs and support, we consolidated all past questions about alignment between the community needs and the project scope and any questions related to community support. And then under the methodology category, we integrated criteria that cover project clarity, consistency, and feasibility. And then we also added a sub-criteria related to best practices. For the last evaluation criteria category, we have plans, and note that the criteria and weights are very similar to the non-infrastructure, so I won't go into that again, but there are a couple of nuancy things that I want to cover for the plan category. So as I mentioned earlier, per CTC guidelines, a total funding for plans is strictly capped at 2%. And so for the San Diego region, that cap is $450,600. We won't exceed that for this regional call for projects. To improve clarity and focus in this project category, we narrowed the scoring criteria from 9 to 5 criteria, and we reduced the total question count from 13 to 11. The streamlining ensures that applicants spend less time on administrative repetition and more time demonstrating the project's impact and deliverability. And the updated scoring criteria make sure that the most meaningful planning efforts are prioritized within that competitive 2% funding cap. And so if you were there on March 27th, you've seen this timeline animation before, but to recap without too much granular detail, we've completed all the stakeholder and TC committee outreach for this draft call for projects and scoring rubric. We've taken in all of your comments and considered them and adapted the final call for projects and scoring rubrics, considering that feedback. And if we approved by the Transportation Committee today, we will take the final call for project for the regional ATP and the scoring rubric to the Board of Directors next Friday on May 22nd. And if approved this summer, SANDAG staff will take our regional call for projects and get it to the CTC and ask for their approval. And if approved by the CTC, we'll launch the regional ATP call for projects in August. Applicants will have 90 days to apply for the regional ATP call for projects. So applications will be due in November. And after all applications are received and any state projects that were not funded from our region also fall into our evaluation responsibility as well. We'll review those applications in the fall and winter, and then we'll bring back a project recommendations to the Transportation Committee in March of 2027. And if approved there, we will go to the board and then finally ask for a recommendation from the CTC to approve the regional projects. That concludes my presentation. I'll turn it over back to the chair to facilitate comments and feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Goldie. Very nice job of giving that overview. Appreciate it. Francesca, do we have any public speakers on this topic?
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 public speakers. First will be Cesar Javier and then Jillian Quint.
We are here as volunteers to help one another. Our understanding as representing 77 residents of City Heights under Councilor Rivera, we understood that 22% of the budget is geared towards improvement of streets, which is the biggest chunk of the 1.6 billion for SANDAG's projects. Mr. Chair and SANDAG staff, may we recommend as a show window to present projects of the city by our Councilor Rivera and Councilor Vivian Moreno as a benchmark, as a pattern, being the show window of the region. We wanted to know. Please, sirs and ma'am Rivera Moreno, we wanted how you pick this priority to respond to, because we have money to match such gift from Uncle Sam, gift from the state, gift from the local, including philanthropists, as declared by our CEO, Mario Orozco. We shall work together, big and small, in the social class society of the region, because this is a rendition of our
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. We have 3 more public comments. We'll start with allegedly Audra, and then we'll go online to Jillian Quint and Blair Beekman.
Thank you. Yes, I feel like it's kind of not very good to have these meetings down here in downtown where the roads are really crap and there's like lawsuits every week for trip and falls. It just doesn't really look good when you guys are acting like you're providing active transportation when if you walk downtown, you're potentially going to get severely injured. And it's also interesting because it's like you guys are really good at competing for grants and you act like this is, you're getting money for what the community wants. No, you're getting money for what the state wants to implement or the federal government. Okay. And we sit here and again, do bike lanes that go to nowhere, spend millions of dollars on them. And it's like, I just don't understand how you guys can act like you are, doing something that's beneficial to the people with our money. Because as long as, like I was talking about before, like you follow the guidelines of what you're supposed to spend that money on, like, sure, you're putting in a bike lane, but it literally is going to nowhere. So when is the auditing going to come forward about things like that, like fraud, waste, and abuse, not just compliance with like your guidelines of spending the money? Like, it's just pretty ridiculous the way the government was set up because it's protecting fraud, waste, and abuse by saying that we're following the policies or the guidelines and not really going, but are you doing something that like literally has no point to it? I mean, it's like telling everybody they have to wear a yellow shirt. If you guys got money for it, you would do that. You would be like, okay, well, we have to do it. That's what we're going to get like $1 billion for it. And it's like, what would be the point of that? Nothing. But it doesn't matter to you guys, and that's what's really sad is that you're willing to do that with our money and then sit here and act like you're benefiting the people. And when you talk about public health, shame on you, because that's not in your wheelhouse and you're not doing anything to protect our public health, especially when you don't do anything about the chemtrails.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Jillian Quint, followed by Blair Beekman.
Hello, really appreciate the grant programs team, your preparation for the ATP regional grants, and also for presenting on the complex rubric and criteria and breaking that down. It was shared in today's presentation that Transportation Committee supported geographic distribution at the March meeting, which I also attended. Now, I don't recall hearing resounding support from the committee on increasing the weight of geographic distribution in the rubric. So my question out there is, how many Transportation Committee members actually supported geographic distribution, and what was the context of the conversation? At the time, it was being called geographic equity, and I'd recommend the committee just take some time to discuss that today. At the previous presentation, there were committee members seeking to elevate their support of projects that would specifically connect communities with employment centers and alleviate congestion in dense areas. So just raising concern and suggesting fuller conversation that geographic distribution is better understood and discussed by the committee before recommending it to the board.
Thank you. Our final speaker on this item will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. It sounded like some good public comment previously. Thank you. Yeah, to quickly offer, I don't know if I quite made clear that good luck with the fare increases issues, and that I think it can be raised to smaller amounts over the next 6 months and 2 years. Good luck in that sort of effort to consider that idea. This was an interesting item to hear in and of itself, and how grant money can work within SANDAG. We are trying to learn how to be more accountable with it and clear, and I think that offers something interesting and helpful and hopeful. So good luck in what this item can be doing for our communities of San Diego County. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thanks for that. Just for clarity on a couple items with respect to one of the public speakers meant that we did something to increase the weights on geographic distribution. Is that correct? I just thought we gave feedback to incorporate them, but we didn't actually increase the weights, correct?
Geographic distribution
so
is
to
a
speak.
methodology and
Right,
not
yeah.
a scoring criteria.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So it's applied after the evaluation and scoring
right.
process.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I just want to be clear on that. And the second one, since it keeps coming up about the bike lanes, I think it is worth noting that that, it's difficult to build things all at once. And I appreciate that sometimes we don't have continuity of infrastructure, but I do believe in this particular round of grants, we are actually putting some weight on connecting infrastructure that exists, correct? And, the one thing I would point out is I bike from Solana Beach. To do that, I will take advantage of the Rose Creek bike lane, the Rose Canyon bike lane, the Santa Fe corridor bike lane, and when we were at the old facility, the 4th and 5th Street bike lanes, and none of those were built at the same time. They all came on different, and they've made my ride down here a lot better. What I need right now is one on Pacific Highway, because since we've moved over here, it's not as convenient to go over to 4th and 5th Street corridor. But it's just a comment that I want to make, that sometimes these things get built piecemeal, but if as long as we have a overall strategy and plan, it can really help people like me that are trying to get around the county through other alternative modes of transportation. So with that, I'll open it up to other committee members. Yes, Ms. Mendoza.
Yeah, I had a question about dividing into districts as well. Have you identified like the districts? Like what would be a district? Would it be the same as, how we're divided now? I hate to say that word. We're not divided. North County coastal, North County, East County, North County inland, North County coastal. Yeah. So is that the geographic distribution that you're going to be using for your methodology?
Production, do you mind bringing up the hidden slide so I can show? Thank you.
So while they're pulling that up, what Goldie will talk through is how we're proposing to do it. We did look at if we were to distribute by subregion. The challenge with doing that, as we look through the last 3 cycles, is we actually think it will do more harm to applicants if we do it that way, just because of the nature that the way projects have scored, that if you have 2 very high scoring projects in the same subregion, someone's going to lose out on that. And so looking holistically at how that would function, we actually thought it would do more harm to the region if we did it from a subregional level. So we're proposing to do it differently. She'll talk about it, but the same way that we did it with the Smart Growth Incentive Program. But we did look into the subregion.
Yeah, it's not, I'm not suggesting, I'm just curious how we're going to do that. Because then if you're also considering disadvantaged areas, most of the disadvantaged areas are in the same regions. So yeah, I'll let you.
So here's a slide that illustrates generally how geographic distribution functions. So you have hypothetical projects up here from cities A through F and hypothetical project scores. And can you progress the slide, Kendall? My clicker isn't working. Okay, so highlighted in the boxes are City A's and City B's second highest scoring project. And if you click again, these projects, while higher scoring, they are skipped for recommendation because City A already received funding for Project 1 and City B's Project 2 is skipped because there's already a Project 1 funded. And if you click again in this hypothetical scenario, funding runs out because there's only $500 available. So you can't go back to the top of the list and reevaluate City A's Project 2 for funding or City B's Project 2 funding. That's generally how geographic distribution works. And remember that this coincidentally works out for this scenario, but the minimum scoring cap is 75 points. So no other project that falls below that threshold can get funding. So you would just work through geographic distribution with your set list of projects that make the minimum project threshold score, and you're funding projects in the first round only. Geographic applies in the first round only, and then it goes back to the top and it goes by highest project score thereafter. Explain that correct?
I think so. So essentially, the very first application from each organization would get funded in that first round to make sure that we're not duplicating funding to an applicant. And then if there's money left, we go back through that list, and then it doesn't matter who the applicant is. We would continue down that list.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah, subject to what Goldie said, which is if it meets the minimum scoring
Correct.
threshold, right? You don't get
Yes.
funding if you don't meet that.
Yes.
On this topic, I'll get to you in 1 second. I just, one other bit of clarity though, that I was kind of curious about. I don't know if we still have slide 3, which was the overall state grants, but very clearly that one. So the geographic distribution that we were talking about would apply to the 22 million SANDAG apportionment, does not apply to the 310 million that's available from the state, correct? That's our criteria.
Yeah.
So there's still a very large chunk of money out there available for competition that does not involve geographic distribution for well-qualified projects, correct?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Mayor Sanchez.
Yeah, question I had is, I believe you said that we are increasing the potential points for disadvantaged. And I think it was 20. What was it last time?
I think it was.
Was it something like 15?
Yeah, it's very minimal
15
that we
or 10.
raised it. Yeah, it was 15.
Well, it's not also just the total points. Now, before we had 200 and now we have 150. So 20 out of 150 would be notably more than 15 out of 200, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was, I don't.
Raise?
Huh?
The reason to raise the
To change it,
points
yes.
was we heard that from this committee, and we also heard it from stakeholders that we wanted to increase the number of points for disadvantaged communities.
Right. I guess it works in some areas. I'll say areas instead of districts, more so than others, because some areas of cities are smaller, and so disadvantaged is like throughout. And it's hard to say, okay, this is a disadvantage. I mean, some yes, but I mean, like, for example, Oceanside is kind of a
So can I
working
ask a
class.
clarifying question on that? I mean,
Yeah.
when I see benefiting disadvantaged community, my interpretation of it is there are disadvantaged people that belong in a disadvantaged community that live everywhere. So if you can actually just show that in your community that the people that are disadvantaged are going to benefit from that project, you would generate some score in that. Maybe not all points, but you would get some score,
Right.
correct?
Okay, that was a question.
Well, I'm asking staff.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct? Or
thank
does it actually have to be a concentrated group of people and saying that particular group of people is going to benefit? How does that work?
So it comes from the CTC guidelines. They have 7 different criteria that qualify for disadvantaged community. One of the things our GIS team is developing is a map so that an applicant could go on there and say, my project is here. Which of those 7 can I qualify for? So it's things like median household income. Do students in the area qualify for reduced school lunch program? We talked about public health factors. There's a series of them that are there. We're trying to get this map. We couldn't get it in time for this meeting to show throughout the region. Pretty much every city is going to have something that can qualify for your project. There may be some very small areas that it just happens one isn't there, but you could pick it up in that second criteria that we added, the public health, because it's just on the border and it's probably indicative that it's still disadvantaged, even if it doesn't meet one of those statewide criteria that qualifies.
Sounds like kind of a mix, very complicated.
is.
I don't know if that answered your question, Mayor Sanchez, or not.
Right. I just know that for certain, not just Oceanside, I've seen this in other cities that are smaller, say like the San Diego, where they just don't qualify, even though it's not an issue that there is a level of poverty in those cities, but geographically it's distributed. So.
And that may happen.
So therefore, those cities never, ever have been able to get any grants.
Surprisingly, some of them have. We had 2 in the last cycle that got 0 points for disadvantage, but all of the other factors for that project, the connectivity that we've talked about,
Right.
how is it going to benefit the community? It's got strong stakeholder feedback. It can override it. So it is possible that someone, even if their project doesn't qualify as a disadvantaged community, could still receive funding. But obviously, you know, we've changed the weights. We'd have to see kind
Right.
of how it functions here, but there is a potential if you've got strong criteria on the rest of those, that it can override that.
So, last question, having to do with the disadvantage and raising it another 5 points, I guess. What got reduced in terms of points? Those five points came from where?
Well, we eliminated cost effectiveness as one. We consolidated sub-criteria, so those get rolled up, and either we adjusted the points in that category so it wasn't so heavily weighted. So we streamlined significantly. That's why we're able to increase points on disadvantaged communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that I did notice, one of the criteria, to Mayor Sanchez's point, is maybe that we could look into is if it would be okay to change the terminology from being located in a disadvantaged community to benefiting a disadvantaged community. So it actually shows that that the community, the disadvantaged community, is getting benefited, but doesn't actually have to be geographic. So for example, if it's making it easier to get to schools, the disadvantaged community that's in that area would benefit from that. Is that something that we can look into?
We could. We had a criteria for that last time to try and bridge that. We had taken it out. We can certainly put that back in.
Great, thanks. Any other committee member comments or questions? This side, yes, go ahead, Rafael.
Just one question on geographic distribution. There's just one example that sort of seems like an exception. It's Councilmember Moreno's district is got 2 entire cities between the southern part of that district and the rest of the city. So from a geographic distribution standpoint, it gets lumped with the rest of the city, but is there any sort of adjustment for an example like that where there's, you know, National City, Chula Vista, before you reach that other isolated, geographically distributed area that otherwise gets lumped with the city?
There isn't right now. That's a change we could make to it. Right now, it's just applicant name, to your point, right? City of San Diego.
Go ahead, Ms. Mendoza.
This under demand analysis, it said SANDAG will conduct a GIS analysis relative to the 5 factors listed below, but I only saw 4 factors.
That's a typo.
Oh,
It should be 4. My apologies.
What's the other factor?
We eliminated transit connectivity, so it went from 5 down to 4.
So there's 4 factors, not 5.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
great.
Thank you for that catch. Apologies.
Okay. No, I just was curious.
Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation here. I do want to make sure that I'm understanding, and this is always a touchy subject here at SANDAG. City of San Diego is 1.4 million people. How does this model account for us being 40% of the population of the county? Yeah.
Right now, it doesn't.
Okay.
Because that was the request that we've received here. We could certainly remove it and go back to the purest model, right, of going down by score order. But right now, it doesn't.
Well, I don't expect my colleagues to agree with me, but I also would feel like I wasn't doing my job as a representative of the city of San Diego if I didn't say that should be removed. At some point, the number of people who live in the places in this county need to matter, especially since there's an intent to prioritize disadvantaged communities. Yeah, I mean, the number of people's got to matter. I think that if we're trying to be fair in any way whatsoever. The population, and especially given the context of there being multiple disadvantaged communities that are bigger than many of the cities in this region. And I've brought it up before, I represent 150,000 constituents or so. 75,000 or so live in City Heights. That would make it one of the bigger cities in the county. The idea that that neighborhood has to compete with the other neighborhoods in San Diego, whether they're in Councilmember Moreno's district or Councilmember Foster's district, or even north of the 8 freeway in Linda Vista, there's something inherently inequitable about that. And so I would ask that some consideration be given to how not factoring in for city size pushes actually against the desire for these funds to be allocated in an equitable way. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Go ahead, Mayor Sanchez.
Yeah, I understand that point of view. The thing is that all the other cities besides San Diego and maybe Chula Vista are not even able to apply for the larger pot of state funds because we don't qualify. This is actually the only opportunity that these other cities are able to qualify. And I think that we all have to respond to our communities when it comes time to talking about, say, an extension of the Transnet. And if we're not able to show that we are at some level able to participate in that smaller amount, then it's difficult to convince folks that this is really all about all of us working together. And it really is. You know, I wish we could apply for some of those funds, but we've never been able to apply at the state level ever. And that's not to say we couldn't use those funds, and we completely understand City San Diego and the larger city of Chula Vista should be able to get those funds for our region. But I think that's where we're trying to kind of coalesce. Thank you.
Councilmember Edson, did you have your light on?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Goldie, I can't remember if it was you or Jenny that mentioned that there was a question about geographic distribution and how that worked, whether it was subregions or your answer was similar to smart growth determination of areas. So did smart growth divide up any of San Diego, or was the entire city of San Diego one region or one area?
We went down by jurisdiction, so City of San Diego was not divided up.
Thanks.
Anybody else wish to speak? Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation. This is always an issue, the ATP grant funding. I want to thank Airport Authority member for bringing up the separation part, and I think that should be considered. Just in the southern part of the district, I have 101,000 residents, just to show how big our districts are. And I do have Chula Vista National City that separates the north from the south. In regards to population, I think that definitely is something that I would like to see be brought back. I think that was, I believe in an earlier edition that was many years ago, that was considered. I do agree with my colleague, Vice Chair Elo Rivera, that should be considered. And the fact that the CTC doesn't allow smaller cities to apply to the other pot of funding, I think is an issue that we should take up as a body. We should take up along with Oceanside to the CTC board. We have a CTC chairperson, Clarissa Falcon, that resides here in San Diego, and that absolutely should be considered. And I would be happy to join the fight with Oceanside and the other smaller cities. It's not an issue for SANDAG. as it is an issue for SANDAG, but SANDAG did not make those rules. We're making these rules. And I think in order for us to be equitable, we should absolutely consider population size. So if we could see that, I don't know when this is coming back.
Yeah, no, so that's that. I wanted to start out with that. My understanding, this is the second time this is before us. We actually talked about this last month. We do have a bit of a challenge. My understanding from staff is that we need to move this forward today. It needs to go to the board in order to we don't have time to bring this back next month. So we have to make a recommendation of something today because we've already heard this once. It's unfortunate we didn't have this level of debate when we did hear it the first time, but we didn't because.
Why can't the board hear this in June? Sorry to interrupt you.
I don't know, but I'm told that we.
Can Robin answer whether the board
Right,
could hear
but
this?
I was going to hand it over to staff, but I was told that we need to hear this one today and move forward.
Jenny and Goldie, can you confirm that maybe bring up the schedule? But that was also my understanding that we have to submit to the CTC by when?
Typically, the CTC adopts a regional call for projects for most MPOs in June. We've already asked for an extension. We're going to August, and that's.
If we need to push it, we could push it, but I wouldn't push it beyond like the early July board meeting just to get it to CTC in time so it can get agendized.
I do.
Okay, and then, yeah, so it sounds like it might be doable. We'll have to see what the body is here, but I don't know what board meeting agendas look like either. So you might want to address what this fits in with respect to the board meeting agendas, and then also just the comment about the ability to compete at the state level pool as well. I think you wanted to address that.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the schedule first. While it sounds like maybe we do have some wiggle room, I do want to remind this committee that the first reading of the transit fare ordinance is scheduled for your June 12th meeting, along with a couple other time sensitive items. So just from an agenda management perspective, it may behoove us to have the discussion today and try to work through that so that we can make sure we hit the deadline for the CTC. As far as eligibility to apply to the statewide competition, my understanding is that all cities are eligible to apply to that. It may be that smaller cities are not competing as well, but certainly are eligible. And so if we're having any challenges applying, please do let us know so we can help facilitate those discussions with the CTC.
We're never capable of qualifying, but I do want to go ahead and move that we recommend this to the board. That's my motion.
Sorry, clarifying on your motion, just so we are clear on the motion, that the motion is staff recommendation.
Yeah.
Did you also want to incorporate the language, investigating the language terminology on disadvantaged communities from within to benefits?
Yes.
Okay.
I do want to include that.
Okay, I figured you'd want to include that. So we have a motion. Is anybody interested?
I second that motion.
We have a second by Councilmember Fleming. Any further discussion? Councilmember Edson, your light's on.
Yes, I kind of put it on a little bit ago, just based on the conversation. I understand better where San Diego is coming from, but I also know that as a small city, we've never been successful at competing at a state level, and this is the only pot of funding for small cities. So I can see the difference.
She just said it's not the only thing.
Well, you've got to also be able to compete at the state level, and if you can't make the criteria, it's a waste of your.
Did you want your mic's on? Sean, did you want to say more?
Yeah. What do we think what would happen if just the jurisdiction was just removed? Like, if you just took that out
and just let projects compete in score order.
Yeah, if the projects that were most aligned with the goals of the program were the ones that were chosen.
I mean, it's hard to predict, but I think what we've seen in prior cycles is you end up with a concentration of funding in specific areas. So we've seen a lot in South County. We've seen a lot.
And why do we think that is?
I think it's the way that the criteria is structured and the nature of those projects. It's kind of following what.
Right, but the projects that fall within this program aim to achieve a particular outcome, correct?
Correct.
What outcome is that?
To benefit disadvantaged communities, improve public health, and
Right.
increase active transportation.
Right. So if continuously the projects from particular areas are the most competitive, it's because they're the ones that are best suited to achieve those outcomes, right? Not because anyone's playing favorites with by jurisdiction. So if what we're actually aiming to do it is to achieve the outcomes that this program aims to achieve, I don't know why we would, and I'm not even asking for the city of San Diego to be favored. I'm not. I think that would be a ridiculous ask of me to ask of anyone here. What I'm asking is that the projects be judged on their merits for the program that we have in front of us. And so I don't know if we would be willing to remove just the jurisdictional title. If not, I'm going to vote no, and I will encourage folks from the city of San Diego to vote no. This is the sort of stuff, though, that, when I was on the board, the full board, it's why San Diego feels like it needs to take such an aggressive approach at times. What we're being told is our disadvantaged communities that have had the worst health outcomes are unable to fairly compete for funding simply because those communities happen to be in a bigger city. And that is objectively unfair to the people in those communities. So I understand that everyone here has a responsibility to represent their cities. And I don't fault anyone for wanting to do that. What I am encouraging us to do is keep in mind the desired outcomes of the program. And the best way to achieve the desired outcomes of the program is to let the projects that are most competitive be decided on, be judged on the merits. I'll conclude with that, understand everyone's position here, but at the end of the day, this program is designed to do something, and the projects that are selected for it should be the ones that are the best to achieve those outcomes.
Thanks, Vice Chair. And I do appreciate your comments. I want you to know that this is a very challenging topic to go over, but I would also frame it, just looking at it from both sides. On the other side of questions of staff, is it a requirement that these projects all be granted to disadvantaged communities?
It is not.
Why not?
The state doesn't require it. It's
right. So
encouraged.
The intention of the program is to also to provide benefit in these other areas as well, correct? But with the way the scoring rubric is worked out, with the way the other rubrics have worked out, because, of the emphasis in this area, it's almost impossible, as Mayor Sanchez has said, for certain communities to compete because you get very little scores in these areas and everybody is able to put forth a good project that shows benefit in other areas. So I do understand that that we have this challenge, and that's one of the reasons why I come up with the thought of having subregions instead of by cities last time. And I understand your answer as to why we don't do it. I'd still point out that, to my earlier point, that of the pot of money that we're talking about, there's 330 million that's openly competitive. It is statewide, but it's openly competitive. There's only 24 million. 1/15 of that is actually regionally competitive that would be subject to this cycle. So there's still a huge amount of money. I personally would like to see us to continue to think about ways to ensure that it doesn't, that the criteria aren't necessarily just always formed that everything is by definition going to go to certain regions. I mean, the tax dollars that go into this are paid by everybody in the state. Other areas should have the ability to compete, to the Vice Chair's point, reasonably fairly, such that the process isn't so heavily biased against it on those levels. But again, if it's just disadvantaged communities, and I do want to help, I would like to see this process work more, and maybe in the future, staff can come back with future ideas on how to shift this up a little bit better. So it does still guarantee that every area of the county can compete, but it doesn't necessarily seem like it's so overcorrected the other way too much as well. But I don't know. Does anybody else have any other comments they want to jump in on? Councilmember Edson.
Yeah, so I'm new to this discussion because I wasn't here when this was heard the first time, but just in listening to it, it was new, and thank you again for the presentation. But the fact that it's kind of tiered, so that first bite at the apple is by the geographic distribution, but the second bite of the apple is project weighted, right? And has nothing to do with the geographic distribution.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I think that's, and maybe the discussion is the first bite of the apple is project based and the second bite of the apple is geographic distribution. I don't know what works best, but I thought it was actually a pretty good idea to try to.
Yeah, I like that, but just for being transparent, have we ever made it through the list more than once?
Typically, no, because
Right.
22 million
Yes,
for
right.
project sizes,
Yeah.
we know, doesn't stretch very far.
Right. Yeah.
I think if there's an openness to considering a both and scenario, staff could take some time over the next week before this goes to the board to consider what some other options might be, if that's what I'm hearing from the members.
I'm definitely supportive of it. It's clearly this conversation, if we move forward with this, will happen again at the board. And I would be supportive of the board having some more options to consider than just what we're looking at that help encourage the funds to be distributed throughout the county on a competitive basis. So I'm certainly willing to I don't know if the motion maker is willing to incorporate that to just also have more thought, or just we'll recommend this, but then also direct staff to take this to the board with some additional options. What's your thought, Mayor Sanchez? You're the motion maker.
How different will it look? I mean, because I don't want this to come back to us, right? Because that's the idea, is to get it to the board.
Yeah. Well,
I think the idea would be that the recommendation going forward would be staff's recommendation when it relates to geographic distribution, ask staff to come back with 2 to 3 options on how best to address that based on the feedback that we heard today.
Okay, yes, I'll go ahead and agree with that. But I have to say, last year was the first time that Oceanside ever was able to qualify to the point of actually receiving funds. And I think that was for the rest of the county as well. And it's difficult when it's a difficult situation to be in if you're not from City of San Diego or other areas that always get these funds, and versus the other cities that don't.
So it sounds like you're okay asking to bring forward a couple other options for analysis and consideration. I mean, the motion would be to recommend this, but to bring forward a couple.
I just want it for us to be mindful that at this level, there, as we have been underscoring, said it's a much smaller pot than the statewide. And I do hope that, and if there's any way that we all can help, that these larger cities, I mean, Oceanside is actually the 3rd largest, and yet we have never been able to get any funding. And we've got the, poverty, but we're not able to qualify. I say qualify, compete, I should say compete. And it's difficult position to be in.
Yeah, understood. So again, just so staff is clear, is it fair to say, Mayor, so just so staff is clear, is it fair to say that, and I'll be asking you if your second's okay with this, that the motion is to adopt staff recommendation with the one language change around benefits disadvantaged community, and then direct them to also go to the board with some options that still do geographic distribution, but maybe differently
yes,
for their consideration. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay. And you're okay? Are you okay that council member?
Yeah, I'd just like to voice my discontent with all of this coming up in the second reading of this. This should have been, people should have been here, and this should have been discussed and debated when we addressed this issue before, not the second time around, but I will second that motion, yes.
I appreciate that. Seeing nobody else up, I will go ahead and call for the vote. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Steve, I didn't see you. Thank you.
I just wanted to remind the committee that as APG representative, the unincorporated communities in the county represent about 500,000 to 600,000 people, certainly with a lot of disadvantaged areas. But we're used to seeing maps with the awards being concentrated along the coast. So a geographic distribution sounds pretty good to us, and we'd like to keep it in a very strong form.
Appreciate that.
Just the last one, I appreciate the addition of the options that very much so. And Mr. Hutchison, I will share that Supervisor Anderson and I have had many conversations about anytime he wants to prioritize the disadvantaged communities in unincorporated areas, I'm all in. I've told multiple members of the SANDAG board that as well. That is like incredibly important to me. And I recognize that there has been significant disadvantages in terms of investments and representation for the unincorporated areas. So in no way am I trying to diminish that or dismiss that. Just wanted to recognize that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, are we good? I'll go ahead and call for the vote. The motion passes with Metropolitan Transit voting no. With that, we are at the end of the agenda. The next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, June 12th at 1 p.m. We will be hearing the fare study then, so please do your best to attend. And I will note again, that's an afternoon meeting, not a morning meeting. And everyone have a great weekend. We're adjourned.